She told me it was just a phase. Her sudden fascination with tattoos, the hours spent researching artists, flipping through designs with a kind of devotion I hadn't seen in a long time. I wanted to believe it was harmless, a creative outlet, something to make her feel alive again. But as the ink began to bloom on her skin, something else started to fade. Us. There was a look in her eyes, each time she came home from an appointment, that didn't belong to me anymore. Her laughter changed. Her silences grew longer. She began hiding her phone, stepping into other rooms to answer calls, brushing off questions with practiced ease. There was a time I could read her without words. I could sense the weight behind her sighs, the joy behind her quiet glances. But now she felt like a story I wasn't being allowed to finish. The tattoos, once symbols of personal expression, became veils, masks layered in ink and secrecy. I remember one night, she stood in front of the mirror, tracing the fresh outline of a raven on her shoulder. She smiled, but not at me. Not even at herself. It was like she was smiling at someone who wasn't in the room. That image never left me. She used to ask my opinion on clothes, books, life. Now it was all curated. What I saw was only what she wanted me to. The sessions at the IT tattoo studio grew longer. There were reschedules, last-minute cancellations, unexplained Uber charges on our joint account. I told myself not to overthink, but even my gut felt betrayed. I watched our daughter notice the shifts too, the forgotten pickups, the tension at breakfast. Kids can sense things adults try to bury. There wasn't a single moment of explosion, no grand confession, just a slow erosion of what we had built together. The tattoos were not just on her skin, they marked the distance growing between us. I never hated the ink. What I feared was what it meant. A transformation she wasn't sharing with me. A version of herself that didn't need me, didn't even see me. And somewhere in that silence, in that growing disconnect, I understood something had changed, and it wasn't just art. It started with a missed call from an unfamiliar number. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but something told me to look deeper. The voicemail was short, muffled voices in the background, and a name I recognized. His. The man who had been leaving ink on her skin was more than just an artist. I ran a quick search out of curiosity. What I found turned my stomach. He had a prior arrest for prescription fraud, a restraining order filed 2 years ago by a former client, and a business license that had been suspended and quietly reinstated. This wasn't just a man with a dark past. It was a man who knew how to cover his tracks. She had once told me the shop was clean, professional. But I started noticing things, receipts that didn't line up with the studio's posted hours, sketchy transactions marked in vague terms. The final thread unraveled when a neighbor mentioned seeing our daughter in the backseat of his car, while my wife ran into a pharmacy. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about trust. This was about safety, about recklessness disguised as freedom. I quietly contacted a friend in law enforcement and asked for help. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I wanted proof. What followed was weeks of quiet gathering. GPS logs from shared devices, bank statements, screenshots of conversations I wish I could forget. And then, the night everything changed. A raid. Not dramatic, not loud, but swift. Controlled substances were found in the studio. He was taken in. She was questioned. And when it all came to light, it wasn't the affair that mattered. It was the exposure to danger. The court didn't care about betrayal. They cared about neglect, about endangerment, about what kind of environment a child was being pulled into. The evidence was cold, factual, surveillance footage, receipts, voice recordings. But none of it captured the quiet ache of seeing someone you loved become a stranger to your family's safety. I didn't press charges out of vengeance. I stayed calm, steady, precise. Because in that moment, my focus wasn't on her. It was on our daughter, on protecting what innocence remained. The law responded not to my heartbreak, but to the risk. And that was enough. I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations or make scenes. I just started documenting. Every late night she didn't come home, every excuse that didn't add up, every moment our daughter waited by the window for a mother who forgot her promise. I wrote it all down, quietly, carefully, because I knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about proving I could offer something she no longer could: stability. I took photos of missed lunches she was supposed to pack. I saved voicemails where she'd cancel weekend plans last minute. I started building a quiet wall of evidence, not out of spite, but because I needed to show the truth to people who wouldn't care about emotions, only facts. Our daughter started clinging to me more, not in panic, but in habit. Like she was beginning to understand who she could count on. She stopped asking where her mother was and started asking what we would do today. Her innocence was adapting to inconsistency. That scared me more than anything else. I knew then I couldn't just wait for things to heal themselves. I had to intervene, not to take her away from her mother, but to give her a life where she didn't have to wonder if she was safe. When the custody hearing came, I was composed. I laid out receipts, timelines, medical records, and testimonials from school staff who had noticed the emotional shifts. I didn't speak badly of her mother. I didn't need to. The facts did it for me. The judge listened, asked questions, read everything. And then he looked at me. Not with sympathy, but with acknowledgement. He saw the structure I had built around my daughter when everything else was crumbling. The day the papers were signed, granting me full custody, wasn't a victory. It was a quiet, painful relief. I looked at my daughter buckled into the back seat. As we drove home, her legs swinging, humming to herself. That sound, the hum of a child who finally felt okay, meant more than any courtroom win. I hadn't fought to win. I had fought to preserve something fragile and pure. Her smile told me I had done the right thing.